Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. Happy New Year, happy 2022. I'm so excited to bring you this class. This is the Sankalpa Word of the Year class. Things that you're going to need for class today are a graphite pencil. You'll want to have your favorite Tangle pen. I happen to have my Pigma pen, but you can use the Micron PN, an 01, an 02, or an 03. I'm going to be working with the Jelly Roll 10 for the white pen, but you can also use the Uniball gel pen as well. Those are great, the white ones, or you can use the Angelic White from Uniball. I have the Jelly Roll Gold from Sakura as well, but you could also use the Uniball Gold as well. Finally, I'm going to be doing a lot of puddling in this piece, and I will be using the Pit Pen from Faber Castell. I love this pen because it's a brush pen and it's got a really nice brush tip that helps you to fill in areas quite quickly. However, if you don't have that, an Identi-Pen will do. Or if worse comes to worse and you don't have any of those, try a Sharpie. They always work in a pinch. You know me, I am a Prismacolor girl. Grab your Prismacolor pencil set and we are going to get started. If you don't have Prismacolor pencils, I want to enable you to go and buy some for yourself. But if you don't for today's class, just grab whatever color pencil set you have because we're all about using the things we have here at Tangled Yogi. All right, so let's get started with the Sankalpa Word of the Year class. So I've been a yoga practitioner for over 20 years and have been teaching yoga for a very long time. And one of the things that I love about yoga is that there is a philosophy that goes along with it. It's not just exercise. And one of my favorite lessons that I learned from yoga is the concept of Sankalpa. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what the heck is that? So Sankalpa is a Sanskrit word that translates, or some people translate it as your heart's desire or your heart's longing. The word san means connection to your highest self, and kalpa is a vow or a promise. So when we're working with the idea of the word of the year, I'd like you to think of it as something that is your highest truth of what you want for the year, and your kalpa is your vow, your promise to yourself that you are going to start to manifest this word. So when you're talking about manifesting this word, I want you to think of it as you're saying it as it is already present in your life. So let's just say your word is peace. I want more peace in my life. So instead of saying, I want more peace in my life, you can say to yourself, peace is present within me right now. So that way you're affirming it and you're starting to manifest it. It is already present for you because you desire it. So it's already there and it's already a truth for you. And so by saying it as an affirmation or that it is already happening, just helps you to manifest it a little bit more. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, what if I fall down and I totally bail on my word of the year? Well, it's okay. All of us do that, right? You hear about people making resolutions at the beginning of the year where they're saying, oh, I'm going to take, this year to lose weight and make better choices about my health. And by the time February rolls around, they've thrown it out the window. What I want to say to you about this is if you fall down, in yoga, we kind of look at it like this. You just kind of moved away from yourself. Right? So you haven't really completely fallen down. You kind of moved away from the thing that you wanted. And the great thing about having your word of the year is every day, every minute is a new chance to practice again. So let's just say you made an unhealthy choice for lunch today. You have an opportunity at dinner to make a better choice for your life. Or let's just say your word was peace and you had a really stressful day. Right before bed, you have the opportunity to sit down, take some deep breaths, maybe write down a few things, and manifest that peace once again. So I want you to think of this as a practice. Every time you fall down, dust yourself off and try it again. So, with all that said, you're probably thinking, okay, well, how am I going to pick a word? And that's a really great question. How do you pick a really important word for the year? And so, what I did was I used reflection as a tool. So, I looked back on 2021 and I looked at my calendar and I saw all the things that I did for the year. Maybe classes that I took, vacations that I took, maybe lunch dates that I had with friends, or Zoom classes that I did. Or you can look back into your photos of 2021 and notice all the people that you spent time with, all the places that you went, all the things that you did. And just notice what was present for you, and then notice what wasn't present for you. Something that you wanted in your life that wasn't there. And so you can take a minute to think about that and maybe write it down, maybe just let a few words come to the surface. And in the link to the video in the description, I have a list of words that you can peruse through. And if some of those start to work for you, write them down. And then start to circle the words that mean the most to you. And then really start to edit it down to maybe your top 3. And finally, when one word is really resonating with you, that may be your word. Now, you may have a word that we call like a hang-on word or a secondary word, and it's okay to have that secondary word. Keep it around, keep it in your back pocket. You may decide you want to come back again and do another one of these beautiful compositions with that word as well. So I hope that this helps you narrow down your word of the year. Let's get started with your Sankalpa. Hopefully you've had a chance to journal for a few minutes and write a few things down, and maybe you have a few words, or maybe you have your word. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write an affirmation on my tile just before I start to do our tangling today. And so my word is flow, and so the affirmation that I have come up with for myself is creativity flows effortlessly through me. So I'm just going to write it down. So creativity flows effortlessly through me. And that's my quote. That's my affirmation. And so once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over my tile so that the affirmation is on the other side and I can begin. So I hope that you will create an affirmation for yourself and have it on the back of your tile. It almost just sets the intention into the tile itself as you begin your tangling. So I have my tile here, and it is 3.5 by 5.5 inches, and I'm going to start the regular old-fashioned Zentangle way by starting to put dots in my corners here. So you can see that I've got my graphite pencil in my hand, and I'm just putting my dots in my corners. I'm going to go ahead and start to connect my dots here. And for me, I like to turn my tile just to make it easy for my hand. And so that way now I have a nice border around my piece. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create what we call the string in Zentangle, and that's just dividing the space. And what I'm looking for is the middle of each line here. So you can see that I'm eyeballing it here, and hopefully I will get pretty darn close to center. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide the space. Now, you could use a ruler for this, but it's really not necessary. This is just strictly a guide, and you can see that I'm going very lightly with my pencil so that it just barely shows, and you can see that it divides the space in a really nice way. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start right in there with the heart. So here's the center of the piece here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up about a ½ an inch and make a little dot, and then I'm going to come to where the center line is and below about an inch and make a dot, and these are going to be my jumping off points for making the heart here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue to work with my graphite pencil, and I'm just going ahead and making a nice wide heart because we want to be able to fit our word into the heart here. So I'm just taking my time, nice wide heart. You can see that I've left about an inch on either side so that I can do more work around it here. Now I will go ahead and come up about another ½ an inch and make a dot, and the same thing at the bottom for a landing space, and now I'm going to go ahead and aura around my heart, and it's okay if it's a little wiggly or wobbly. It's all just fine. And you can see there is the aura for my heart. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to establish the mandalas that are on either side. So I'm still working with my graphite pencil here. I'm going to turn the piece on its side here just for a second, and I'm going to work on the top of my heart. I'm going to make 2 dots, one at the top of this arch and one at the top of this one, and I would say that these are about an inch apart here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an arc to build the mandalas off of. Now I'm going to go ahead again and I'm going to do another aura right there, and then I'm going to flip the heart upside down and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm looking for 2 spots, and you can see that these 2 spots are close to the bottom but not quite, and they're a little less than an inch, and that's just fine because once I get this aura up and over, it'll be a balance of what's on top. So you're going to see me just come in and aura that. And that looks pretty well balanced to me. So go ahead and do yours. I'll finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start tangling. So I'm picking up my pen. I happen to have my pigment pen, but if you've got your micron pen, you can grab that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to do what we call an overdraw. And all I'm doing is just going right over what I just did in here with the heart. We're establishing our lines and our composition here. I'll establish my aura as well. And then I'll establish the arcs that are on top and on bottom. Once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and come into the aura around the heart. So I'm going to go onto the inside of it, and I'm just going to do kind of an elongated crescent moon, or it might look like a scallop to you. I'm going to go ahead and continue to scallop, and I'm being mindful as to how big these scallops are and trying to keep them the same size. Now, once you get in here, if you have an issue like I do, where it's going to be kind of off in here, I'm just going to skip it and leave a little diamond in there. So it ends up being a little something like this. Now down in the bottom where I have this area, I'm just going to put a little circle in there just to make it interesting. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work with our mandalas. So before we work with our mandalas here, I just want to address the interstices that are around our scallops here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the interstices and start to puddle them in. Interstices are these kind of weird triangle shapes. And you can see that I'm puddling in that triangular-like shape. And you can see that when I do that, it really brings those shapes forward and gives a lot of gravity to the heart. Okay, now this does take a minute for you to get all the way around. You can wait to do it till the end, or you can do it now. The other thing that I'm going to do inside of the scallops is I'm going to put in a nice line right in here. So you're going to see me come in and put a line inside of each of these. And I'll go all the way around and do those. So if you want to do this right now, you can go ahead and do it right now. You can wait until later. It's not a big deal. It's just a little something before we start with the mandalas. Okay? So have some fun with this. Take your time. Enjoy what you're doing. And breathe. Let's go up to the top of the piece and work with the mandala that's up top here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to use this line as a way of giving me a guide, as it were. I'm going to make a line that's about a ½ inch long right next to it on the left hand side. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to come over about a ½ inch and I'm going to do it again. I'll do it one more time. And then I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same. So it looks like rays of the sun. I'm also going to come in now and start to arc over the top of each piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the interior lines and I'm going to arc, and I'll arc again. Now notice that I've got this one right down over here. I'm going to go ahead and arc and touch the heart, and then I'll come over here and do the same. Same thing over here. I'm going to arc. Now this one is a little bit longer, so I might just let it come in and touch the heart that way and just make it look like I've started another one right there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to turn this over. I'm using this as my guide. 1 and 2. Remember, these are about a ½ inch long. And I'll go and do the same thing on the other side. So it looks like rays of the sun, looking for the interior lines first, coming in and arcing, and then this one will come down and over, and then I'll go over to the other side, and one more over here. So that when I zoom out, it has a really nice balance. Go ahead and finish up yours, and when we come back, we're going to start to add detailing. So let's add a little bit of three-dimensionalness to these petals here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a little bit of an arc that happens in here. You're going to see me create a little bit of a wavy line. It's going to go in, then out, and then back in again. I'll do it again. So it's going to go in, then out, then in again. Now over here, because the heart is impeding it, I just want you to think of it as coming in, then out, then in again. Same thing over here. And this one, we'll just let it come off to the side. So let's flip this around and do it again. Same thing. It's just a wavy line. That's really all it is. Coming over to this side. And once again, because the heart's impeding it here, so that when I go ahead and zoom out, look at how nice that is with those flowers. All right, go ahead and finish up yours, and when we come back, we're going to start to work outside of these petals. So let's continue building the mandala here. I'm going to come up just above where the petals are that we just worked on, and I'm just going to make a little dot in the middle of each of these petals. And this is going to be a landing point for us here. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to come up to where my border is. Here it is. I'm going to make a dot and let it drop down, and a dot and let it drop down. I'm going to turn my tile. I'm going to look for this center line here. I'm going to look for where this petal stops, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a line right there, or rather a dot. And then I'll go ahead and I'll arc in, arc in. Same thing over here. So here's where the line is coming out. I'm looking for where that stopped. I'm going to put it right on the border there. I'm going to arc, and then I'm going to arc. Now I'm going to pause before I get down to the heart. So there's going to be two petals on each side of this top petal. So I'm going to come over to the other side. I'm coming out, making my dot, coming back in again, and coming back in again. Going over to the side, looking for my line here. Here's my line, here's my dot, coming in towards the center and coming in towards the center. So that what I end up with is two on either side of that top one right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and go outside of my border just a touch, and I'm going to go ahead and make little dots in between and above where my petals are. These are going to be ways in which I can aura and not feel like I'm all over the place. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to connect the dots. I find that it's easier for me to do my auraing when I have a place to land. And I'll just reconnect back in. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So all I'm doing is just connecting the dots. So that when we are finished, it looks a little something like this. We're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side, so go ahead and do yours, I'll do mine, and when we come back, we're going to add some tangles on the inside. It's really coming along already, and this is a great template that if you want to come back in and do different tangles on the inside of your piece, you absolutely can. So think of this as something that you can revisit or have a more of a relationship with your word, as it were. Okay, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to work in these pieces right here. So let's zoom in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little circle right in between where those two lines are. So you're going to see me come up at the top and put a little circle right up at the top. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Same thing over here. And then I'll go to the other side. Right in there. And hopefully it's centered enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tangle that I really love. This is called Footlights, and I just think it's a beautiful tangle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to start by making a little bit of a V that comes in towards the center here. And then I'm just going to go right off the side, making it look like rays of the sun. Do the same thing over here. And it gives it a beautiful Art Deco type feel. So all it is a little V, and then diagonal lines going off the side. And you can go as many times as you like with it. And you can see that that brings a really festive feel into the piece. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to go over to the other side and do mine, and when we come back we're going to add a little bit more into our petals. So we're going to build a little bit more off of the petals here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up into this area in here and start to add some arcs into the piece. So what it's going to look like is I'm going to come in and I'm going to add an arc right in where the valleys are of our petals, and I'm trying to make my arcs about the same size. Now that one got a little bit bigger than I had hoped for, but that's okay. Now these outside pieces right in here, I'm going to leave them alone. So I'm going to flip the piece upside down and do the arcs again. Leaving these pieces alone. Once I have that, each arc is going to get 2 more arcs going over it. However, on the side we're going to add a little bit of flux just jumping off the side, and I'll show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right here and I'm going to do an arc, round off and touch the top, or really close to the top of where this petal is. I'm going to go over here and do the same. So just close to the top but not exactly at the top. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to go arc, and I'm going to arc again. I'm going to come over to the next one and do the same. So I'm going ahead and doing those flux. And then I'll go ahead and I'll arc. Once again, coming over, doing a little flux, one over here, and then an arc, and an arc. So that when I zoom out, you can see that this starts to give it a really neat feel to that mandala. Here's one more. And then we're going to arc and arc. Isn't that pretty? So go over to the other side and do yours. Remember, leave these spaces in between alone. We have other things that we're going to do in there. Okay? Have some fun with this. I'll see you in a minute. So you can see that this is really building up quite nicely. Having a lot of fun with this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work in the spaces in between. You know me, I do love tipple. Tipple is one of my favorite tangles to do. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add some tipple that's going to probably break the border here a little bit. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start by putting in a really nice tipple right in here Tipple is just a large circle, and then I'm going to do maybe a smaller one right over here. Now I like to let my tipple effervesce, and so I'm going to make my tipple look like they're flying off of the page a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do a smaller one out here and a smaller one out here. So I want you to think of champagne, how champagne bubbles have a tendency to go outward. The same thing would be said for what we're doing right now. So I'm going to come over here and do a nice large one. I'll come up here and do another one. Then I'm going to do maybe a smaller one in here. And remember, I like to vary up my sizes. Do a tiny one over here. Maybe one more smaller one right in here. So you can see that I'm not being exact with it. I kind of wanted to have a feeling of spontaneity to it. And then I'm going to go ahead and let a couple of tipple come up into the corners here. So if you wanted to put one into the corner, you could go ahead and put one right in here. Maybe add one down over there. I think I like that idea, so I'm just going to roll with it. Maybe I'll add a third right there and right there. I was taught to work in threes, so that might be something that works for you. Just going around, having some fun. You can break the border if you like. I like to kind of bob and weave out of my borders. I think it's interesting. So once you've got your tipple the way you like it, and I'm not really going tipple crazy today, I'm going to go ahead and start to ink in my borders. So you have those borders that you did with pencil early on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to bob and weave around my mandala and around those circles, the tipple, that we just put in. So you can see that I'm hollybuying, which is the Zentangle word that we use for this. I'm just working my way around. And then finally coming up into this corner right over here. And you can see that when I come back around, notice how that border really holds the space. It gives everything a little bit of gravity, which I really like. Go ahead, finish yours up, and then when we come back, we are going to start to work inside of our piece, doing one more last detail before we start to do color. So remember when we were talking about our word? So now is the time to put in the word here. And what I want to do is I want to talk about your Sankalpa, your heart's desire. And if you don't have a heart's desire today, or you're unclear about your word for the year, you can always wait until later to put it in. It's just fine. Now, for those of you who are a little concerned about lettering, there's a really easy way to do some lettering in here to make it work for you. So my word of the year is flow, and I've got my pencil in my hand here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to print out my word flow. Now, if you're not a letterer, and I am certainly not a letterer, I like to play and I like to learn, and I am in the process of learning to do lettering. So one of the things that I was taught was if you put a little weight on the back end of your written out print, it gives you a really nice weight. Now, one of the things that somebody told me was every time that you have a line that goes down, that is the word, or that is the part that you give weight to. So when you go L, you give weight to the back of the L. When you have the O, you give the weight to the back of the O. Now with the W, you can see that I've added a little extra right in here. You can or you don't have to. It doesn't really matter. Now let's just say you wanted to do this in cursive. So I'm just going to do it with the F first, and then I'll come and cross through. I'll do my L. Notice how slowly I'm going with my lettering here. It's really about drawing it, it's not about writing it. So I'm just going to come in and add a little bit of weight on the back end of that L, a little bit of weight on the back of the O, and then I'll come in and do it on the back of the W. Okay, now what makes this look really interesting is filling it in. Now you may decide, oh, I really like the way that this looks blank because it has all that really interesting lettering going on with the lines and whatnot. You could also come in later and do color going up the insides of these, or you could fill it in just with black. So I'm just going to do a demonstration really quickly with the way that it looks with the black. And I'm just working my way through, puddling this in, and it does give it a little bit of elegance to it rather than just drawing in the word. And then you could go in and just clean up your lines. Just like so. Which is really fun. So just a nice little way of doing some lettering there for you. So if you want to put in your word, now's the time to do it. Go ahead and do yours, I'll do mine, and when we come back, we're going to start with color. So let's get started with some color. Yay, color! We're going to start with 3 different colors today, and the reason for this is I want to give a lot of dimension into the heart. So the first color we're going to start with is the Spanish orange, which is PC1002. I also have in my hand orange, PC918, and then I have pomegranate in my hand, which is PC195. Now, you could also use Crimson Lake, you could use crimson, you could use magenta, any of your favorite reds will do. This is a color that I've been trying to challenge myself with all of the longer pencils in my set, and pomegranate is one of those that I haven't really used yet, so I'm going to go for it today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with the yellow first, and I'm going to very softly start to bring some yellow in towards the top of my piece. Now you'll notice that I'm pretty well sharpened up, and I'm going to go ahead and use the side of the lead on the paper. So you can see the way that I'm holding the pencil is not how you would traditionally hold it like this, but I'm holding it with my index finger and my thumb. And I'm just going to go ahead and very, very lightly rub the side of the lead into the paper here. Now I'm not pressing overly hard, and I'm just working little circles. And you can see that just by doing that, you get a really nice mist of color that really fills the space rather quickly. So that's about as much of the yellow as I want to use. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my orange, which is also pretty well sharpened up, and I'm going to work with the side of the orange very, very lightly, just dusting through, starting to make a really soft ombre of color. So just working right through there. And then finally, I'm going to let go of the orange and bring in some of that pomegranate. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to use the pomegranate, which is also really nice and sharpened up, and I'm going to start to build off of it. And it really does look like pomegranate. Isn't that so pretty? It has a coolness to it, that color does. Now I'm going to let it kind of bump into the orange. You can see that I'm kind of dusting back and forth on the edge. And now you're going to see me pick up my pencil and I'm going to start to use it the traditional way. I'm going to go very, very softly around the edge. And give this a little bit of shadow. Now I'm not pushing too hard because this is a really dark color. I already know that it's going to give me a lot of punch when I need it to. But you're going to see me start to develop a little shadow on the inside of the heart. Turning my tile as I go. Just working my way around. And you're going to see me start to let little circles work this shadow in there. I feel like it really gives a softness to it that wouldn't normally be there. So I'm turning my tile as I go. Developing that shadow. See the little circles that I'm kind of bobbing and weaving in with. So now I've developed that shadow. Once I have that, now I can go around the edge and really start to give this a push. So you can see that I'm giving pressure to that pencil. Now, if you've watched some of the other videos from this series, you always know that I talk about how each pencil is 3 different colors. You have your light, you have your medium, and you have your dark. And it's all about how much you're pressing on your pencil. So if you tend to be heavy-handed, I always leave the heavy pressing of a pencil for later. You can always come back and make it darker, but it's much harder to make it lighter. So you can see now as I've gone around, it's starting to develop a really nice feel around that. I'm going to start to give this just a little bit of pressure right at the tip of the heart here. I would say this is a medium pressure. And then I'm going to go over right into this area and start to give a little bit more shadow right on this side of the heart. So I'm really not pressing that hard. I'm giving this maybe a light to medium press on here. You can see that's already developing a really nice feel to it. Now I'll come in and I'll lightly start to fade off a little bit. I'm going to pick back up some of that orange here, and I'll start to bob and weave with the orange a little bit into where that pomegranate is, just to develop a little bit of warmth in that red. I'm going really pretty lightly with this. And then I'm going to pick up some of that yellow again, and I'm going to come up towards the top and start to bob a little bit into that red up at the top, just to give it a little bit of warmth. You're going to see me start to make my way downward just a little bit into the orange. So I'm starting to do just a little bit of blending in here, a little softening in the colors. Coming up to where that shadow is meeting, getting in there. And you can see that this is getting a really nice softness to it. Now, if you feel as though you want to get a little bit more blend in your colors, you can always pick up a little bit of white. Now, I happen to have the Prisma white in my hand here. This is PC938, and I'm just going to ever so softly start to bring in a little bit of that white and start to get this to blend a little bit softer. You can see that I'm doing little circles. And notice what it's doing for that color. It's really softening it up and giving it a really nice glow. You can always come back in and clean up your word later if you feel like your lettering is getting a little lost. But look at how pretty that is when you bring in the white. It just gives that color a pop. And I'm just kind of softening out the edges a little bit. Really pretty. All right, so you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to work on mine, get it the way you like it, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work on those outer mandalas. Isn't that fun? Really starting to look pretty. I continued to play a little bit with this, and I started to add a little bit of orange right underneath where that pomegranate is, just to give it a little bit more of a glow around the edges. So you can see that I'm bringing my orange around in here and down through in here. And I'm going to pick up my white pencil and start to just blur out those edges just a little bit so that we don't have a strong line of demarcation in there. But you can see that just by adding a little bit of that orange, it really gave it a little bit of warmth in there that I was looking for. All right, so go ahead and finish up yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work up in here. So many of you have heard me talk about carrying color in my classes, and that's mainly taking the color that you just worked with and bringing it to another part of your piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up into this area right in here. Now you might notice that there's a little bit of some pencil lines in there, and if you feel the need to erase yours out, you're more than welcome to do so. I can just grab my little kneaded eraser and just clean that up really quickly. So I'm going to start with the yellow first, and I'm going to just very softly start to dust into this area. So you can see that I'm still working with that pencil on its side, and I'm not pushing hard, I'm just lightly moving the color around on the page here. You can see how quickly that fills up. If you're working on your pencil tip, it's going to take a long time, but if you're working on your side, it really fills up quite nicely. So once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up my orange and start to create a really beautiful shadow coming down from the outside piece. Finally, I'll pick up my pomegranate and I'll just dust the edge with a little bit of that pomegranate. I'm going to turn it on its side a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll come back in with the yellow and I'll start to blur out my edges again. You can see I'm giving it probably about a medium tension there. And look at how that starts to glow. Really is beautiful. Now, in order to do all of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by using my yellow first. I tend to do all of my lights first. You know, your mind is kind of a funny place to be because it starts to think about all the different things that it has to do. And I like to simplify when I'm working with my color. So you're going to see me turn my page and just do all of my lights first. And then that way I'm not picking up and putting down a ton of pencils. I'm just getting into the groove of what I'm doing. You can see that it goes fairly quickly to do all those yellows. And then finally I'll come in with a little bit of the orange. Give that a dusting of color right in here. And I'm going to do that in all those little petals. So you're seeing me go around just with the orange. I don't have to pick up and put down. Coming around to the other side. And then finally, or lastly, I'm going to pick up that pomegranate and I'm going to start to bring in that shading. Oop, I've got pencils rolling around over here. They do tend to roll. You can see the way that I'm holding that pencil. It's more traditional. Coming over to the other side. You can see I'm taking my time. I'm not really rushing through this. I'm just having my own pace. And that's really important, to just go at your own pace. I'm going to come back in with some of that yellow and start to blur out my edges. And you can see that just gives it so much dimension. So go ahead and blur your edges and do your thing. I'm going to flip it over and go to the other side and start to work on those. Take your time with this. Enjoy what you're doing. This is really about thinking about your Sankalpa, your word of the year, your intention, and allow it to start to manifest right here and right now. This is a great place to follow that exercise of creating and manifesting that word for yourself. Okay? All right, I'll see you in a minute. Go ahead and do both sides of your mandalas in just that fashion. So I'm letting go of the colors that we were working with before, and I'm going to bring in two new colors into our piece here. I happen to have aquamarine in my hand. This is PC 905. And then I have violet in my hand, which is PC 932. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to fill in the flower here with the aquamarine, and you're going to see me come into the petals with the side of the aquamarine. So you can see how sharpened up that lead is, and you can see that I'm very gently filling in the petal. Once I've had a chance to fill in the petal with the aquamarine. I'm going to take it in a much more traditional stance here and hold the pencil the way I normally do, but I'm going very, very lightly with this pencil tip because I know that if I push too hard, this is going to get really, really heavily pigmented. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a nice shadow, so you can see the way the shadow is moving is the same way that this line is moving. It's very easy to just do a block, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the shape of the arc. And then I'm going to dust the back edge of the petal with a little bit of that blue. Now once I have that, I'm going to come back in, I'm going to pick up that violet, and I'm going to just go in right underneath the lip of the petal here and give it a dusting of that violet. These two colors play so nicely off of each other. They're really quite lovely to work with. And then I'll come back in with that aquamarine and I'll just blur out my edge a little bit. Now, if you would like to do a little bit more blending, you could also pick up some of your white and make sure that your pencil is clean, so clean off the top of it, and then you can go in and really soften those colors together. You can see that I'm doing little circular motions just to get that softening, and then coming in and cleaning that up a little bit more. Look at the glow that that gets after using some of that white. Really beautiful. So I'm going to go through and do all my lights first, just the way that I did up in here. So the idea is to come in and to do all of the lights first in each and every one of these, then come back, hold the pencil traditionally, do your shadow, and then come back in with the violet, and then a little bit of the white. Okay? Have some fun with this, relax and enjoy what you're doing. Remember, you can make this tile last almost as long as you like, so you can make it last as long as a week. One of the things that I talk about with my students at the library is you can savor this like a good book and just do little bits at a time, or you can just go for it, both feet, and jump in and do the whole thing. So just enjoy what you're doing and stay present for it. All right, have fun. Really loving the way that this is turning out here. Let's start to carry the color just a little bit more. So we're going to take the same blue that we've been working with, and we're going to start to bring it up into where our crescent moons are. So let's zoom in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with that aquamarine first, and I'm going to lightly dust on the sides. And you'll notice that I'm going to leave a light center or a light point right in the center here. And then I'm going to press a little bit more heavily with that aquamarine. And then I'm going to go again and start to press a little bit harder right over in here. Now you'll notice that I picked up the violet for that part, so I'm just giving this a little bit of intensity here and here. Now I'm going to go ahead and blur some of that out, so you can see that I've picked up the aquamarine again, and I'm just blurring out the edges of where the aquamarine and the violet are meeting, and look at how that gives almost a metallic feel. That's just really beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way around and do all of these, pieces, but I'm starting only with the aquamarine, and then I'll come back in later with the violet, just the way that I did in all of these. That way you're not picking up and putting down pencils, okay? Relax your shoulders, take a deep breath, exhale it out, and go for it. This thing's really coming to life. I'm really starting to enjoy it. So here we go. We are going to let go of the blues, and we're going to start to work with gray. Now, some of you, well, all of you, let's be honest, I've said this a million times, but I'll still say it again for those of you who are new. You guys know that I'm left-handed, and I don't necessarily enjoy working with graphite. So I'm going to be working with one of my favorite pencils from Prisma. This is the 1065. This is the 70% cool gray. I love this because it doesn't smudge or smear, but you can use graphite if you want to. It's not a big deal. It's just a preference for me. Now remember, if you don't have the same colors as me, you could use the 50% cool gray, the 50% warm gray, just whatever gray you have handy is just fine. We're using it as a color that is going to give some gravity to a piece that is getting really busy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to start with the heads of the flowers that we have in here. And I really didn't want to be traditional with sticking, a yellow head inside of a flower. I wanted to be a little bit off the cuff here, a little bit spontaneous and not really predictable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to add that gray. You can see that I'm sharpened up, and I'm going to dust into the head of the flower here. You'll notice that I'm leaving a light source. On the left hand side over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to give a little bit of a push to that pencil now. Still working in a circular motion, using a little bit more of the tip of the pencil now. Coming through and getting a little bit of that darker color in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the black from my my Premier set. So I've got my Prismacolor Premier colors here, and it's PC 935. I'm just going to add a very light dusting of black. So I'm going ever so lightly with it. Right along the edge, in here and over here. Just getting a little bit of depth for it. And you can see that just by adding a little bit of that black, it really starts to bring some of that depth in. Now I'm going to pick up my white again. Now notice my white has got some blue on it, so I'm just going to clean that off with my finger. And I'm going to really start to blend into that gray, circular motion with that pencil. Notice how I'm starting in the lightest part first and then going back. If you pull from the back forward, the whole thing will turn dark. But if you go from the light to the dark, it will get a really nice blend. Look at how pretty that is. It almost looks like marcasite, that beautiful stone marcasite. So when I zoom out, look at the gravity that gives to the piece. It's really quite pretty. So I'm going to flip my piece over and do the other side. Now in here, it's kind of being impeded by the tip of the heart. So I'm just going to play and start to bring in some of that gray in there. I'm going to leave that light source. But now I'm going to use the heart as a place where I can give a shadow. So you're going to see me kind of climb up the sides of the tip here with a little bit more pressure. But notice that I'm leaving some light in there too. And then I'm going to pick up that darker color, that black that we have from the Prisma set. And I'm even going to do just a skosh of it over here. Then I'll pick up that white and start to dust back. So remember, we're dusting back. Remember to try to leave as much white in there as you can, or light in there as you can, because it gives it dimension. clean that off a little bit, coming in from the light first and then moving my way back. Blurring out my edges so that when I turn it over, look at how pretty that is. Those two really anchor the piece quite nicely. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work with the heart. So once you've had a chance to get into these areas, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my gray again, and I'm going to start to dust the area around the heart. And you can see that I'm working with the side of the pencil again, but I am staying a little bit on the tip. Not too much on the side, just enough to get a little disbursement of color. And you can see that I'm working with the pencil in that circular-like motion. I'm not pressing hard because we can always go darker later. I'm just laying down that foundation. Let's get that really nice and close for you. I'm going to turn the piece on its side to make it easy for my hand here. Notice how I'm leaving the light at the tips, not filling up all the petal, just leaving the light up at the tips, bringing a little three-dimensionality into the piece. And then I'm going to turn the piece back upright, and now I'm going to press a little bit harder right around that blackened edge. Coming in and over. Look at the depth that brings. Isn't that lovely? It almost looks like that heart's ready to pop right off the page. You could even go in with your black if you wanted to, and even go a little bit deeper with it. Turning the piece on its side. And look at how lovely. It's just even getting more and more poppy right off the page. If you want to go in and do some of your white to blur out any edges that you might have, you can always go in and blur out some of those lines of demarcation. Get a little softness. You can see I go around a couple of times with it. Look at how lovely. All right, so go ahead, do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work with tipple on the outside edge. So we've talked about the concept of carrying color, and we're going to continue to do that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my tipple that I have in here, and I'm going to start to shade those in. You'll see that I'm coming in really soft with that gray, leaving that light source over here. Coming in a little bit harder with it, little medium tension there. And then finally I'm going to pick up that black pencil here very lightly. Just dusting the edge of it with a black pencil. I'm going to grab some of that white. Remember, we're starting from the lightest area and working our way back, little circles in the lightest part first, then we work our way back. And it really gives it a nice soft feel. Go ahead and do your tipple. I have to say, this tangle for me is such a meditative tangle, and especially when I'm doing my shading into it. So I really hope you'll use this as a time to just let your mind be present with what you're working with and just get into the groove of what you're doing. It can be so engrossing if you let it. Let's continue to carry the gray that we have in the piece here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start to bring it up into the top of where the mandala is. So I'm going to come into this area right in here and start to treat it just the way that I did down in here. Now I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of a darkening in here. And then I'm going to even pick up a little bit of black and just dust the edge. I'll start to bring in a little bit of that white and always start from the light back, so that when I turn it, look at how beautiful that is. It really has a nice relationship between these two, and I'm going to bring it all the way around into here. So have some fun with these. Super fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one last piece of the gray in here, and what it's going to look like is I'm going to come into these little flux-like shapes or teardrop-like shapes, and I'm going to dust from the bottom up and get right in there. Notice that I'm leaving a little bit of light up top. I'm going to give it a little bit of darkness down at the bottom. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Look at how pretty that is. So go ahead and just finish off those pieces, and then when we come back, we're going to start in with some really cool stuff. So I love where this is going. It's just got so much movement and brightness. It's very festive, which I really like in my tangles. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to bring a little bit more of the party to the piece here. I'm going to get out my gold metallic pen from Sakura. Now, if you have the Pen Touch pen, that's a great one. Or if you have the Uniball gold, that's a great one. It just depends on what gold you like to work with. Sharpie has a really nice gold that you can work with. So really it's up to you what your favorite gold is. Now you may decide you want to do another color. That's totally fine too. I just think that gold is great for the season. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work with the gold, and I'm going to bring it into the area that we have our flower in and really accentuate the idea of the sun. So I'm coming in with that gold pen, and you can really see that the Sakura gold is quite lovely. It's got a nice shimmer to it. It's pretty easy to work with. However, I will say this, if your gold pen is old, it does have a tendency to get kind of a viscous film that might show up, so you want to make sure that your pen is in good condition before you start a project with it. So I'm going to just get right in there, make sure that I'm on camera. Sorry if I fell off there for a minute. And then I'm going to go into the rays of the sun. So I'm just going to come up. I'm being mindful of the black. If I can keep it, I'm going to try. Turning the tile. Turning the tile, make sure that you're mindful of where your hands are, This stuff does like to smudge. However, because all of that waxy pencil is around, you could always take a white pencil if you get some smears and try to work it off of the piece. You can already see that this is starting to get a really nice shimmer. Look at the dimension that that brings to the piece. Super, super fun. The other place that I'm going to go with the gold is I'm going to go around the petals here. Remember, I'm really trying to hold on to the black. If you lose your black, don't worry about it. You can always bring it back in later on. So you can see that I'm going to work around all of this in here. I'm just going to do half of this for the demo so that you can really see what I'm up to. What I love about the gold is that it is very forgiving, so if you have lines that didn't really work out for you, you can always go over them and then come back in with the black later. And remember, with the gold pen, the lighter you go, the more the ink flows. So if you're pushing hard on that pen, see if you can just lightly touch the page with it. I often talk about tickling the page with the pen, and that really does help with the sakuras. So look at how pretty that is. Isn't that cool? Now, I'm going to zoom out. I'll finish all this up in a few minutes, but for the class today, I just want to show you what else I'm going to do with it. So I'm going to do a line around the heart, and the reason for that is when I come back in with the black, it's going to give me a border around the heart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go very, very gently around the border. So I'm taking my time here. I can't stress that enough, to take your time. I just read a quote the other day that I really loved where it said, "The culture teaches you to hurry, art asks you to slow down." And I thought that that was very, very true. Culture asks you to hurry, art asks you to slow down. So I'm coming around, making sure that I'm getting in here really nice and slow. So that when I lift it up, look at the shimmer that I'm getting off of that around the heart too. So go ahead, do your petals, do your spokes, come down here, do it here, and when we come back, we're really going to start to see this thing come to life. So I'm just loving this. Look at how beautiful that is. If you lift it up and look at all that shimmer, it just has so much fun and festivity to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to bring in the background. Now I want to make a suggestion to you. You could go in a couple of different ways with this. If you wanted to add a contrasting color to your background, you could totally do that if you wanted to. You could leave it white. Some people really love using white in their background, so you could leave it that way. I'm going to bring in the black because I love how graphic black is. It just gives everything a really big pop. Now, if you've got a good brush pen or what I like to call a puddle pen, a pen that fills in a lot of space, that is very helpful. One of my favorite pens that I talk about a lot is the Faber Castell Pit Pen. This is the SB. It is a nice brush brush pen, and it is ink, so that if water gets on it, it is not going to smear or smudge. It's waterproof. Now, if you like using the Identa pen is great because it's got a nice thick nib, and so it can fill in these areas, but it can also give you a little bit of control like in the smaller areas as well. And what's great about the Identa pen is it also has the smaller tip. So you may want to check out the Identa pen from Sakura as well. So those are two pens just right off the top that I'm thinking of. Now, if you don't have any of those handy, a Sharpie will suffice. Sharpies are fine, but they do have a little bit of stink to them, but they do the job if you need it. All right, so I'm just going to pick up my SB, the brush pen, and so I just want to specify that this says SB on it for the brush. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start to fill in the areas around the tipple, but I'm not going out into my border. So you can see that I'm going to really take my time with this and start to fill in all the negative spaces that I have around the tipple and around the border. Now you can see why I pulled the gold around the heart, because I didn't want the heart to get lost in the background. So I'm really just going through and taking my time. Let's get that a little bit bigger for you so you can really see what I'm up to. And what I love about this brush pen is the tip is really fine, so that if I want to get into places that are really tight, if I don't press hard and just keep it right on the point, I can fill in areas that are really, really small. But you can see, look at the difference between this side and this side. Look at how bright and vivid that got. So I'll even come down into the corners. And start to fill those in. And the key with this is you want to make sure that there's no white poking through your black. So take your time with it. There's something so satisfying about filling in with the black. I just can't explain it. So here you go. You can see already that this is really starting to come into fruition here. So go ahead and do yours, I'll do mine, and then when we meet up, we're going to finish off the piece. Now I'm going to carry my black just for a moment here. You can see inside of each of the suns here I've got these circles that I have, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some black, and you'll notice that I'm leaving a little light source in there to keep it interesting. So I'll go around to these and start to bring in, let's make sure that's on camera here, a little bit of a light source, and I'm going to go all the way around and do those pieces. Isn't that so fun? I'm just having such a good time with this one. What I really like about this is that, I've had a chance to do this piece once before, and now I'm getting a chance to do the things that I would have changed from the first one. So I hope that you'll come back and try this again and do different things with it. So I've got in my hand the Jelly Roll 10. This is the white Jelly Roll from Sakura, but you can also use the Uniball white, the Angelic white. Any of those will do for this. This one just happens to be in the studio right now, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of shimmer and light to the piece. So I'm going to start with the heart. And I'm going to come in and create a little bit of a light source right in here, depending on if the pen's going to let me. So I'm just creating a little shimmer and a little light right up in here. And I'll go ahead and add a couple of dots with that. And then in my gemstone up in here, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of shimmer right up in there. A couple of dots. And I may have to go back and clean that up just a little bit here, so you can see just adding a little bit there. And then for the tipple that we have in here, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more shimmer into those. So you're going to see me go and add the white, a nice line, and then a couple of dots. And you can see how much that adds to the piece. Just by giving that a little bit of glisten, you know, it's got a really nice feel to it. I'll come up to the top and these pieces right in here, and I'm just going to add a little dot in there if the pen will allow. Remember, the lighter you go, the more the ink flows with these guys. Remember to watch your hand because you don't want to smear or smudge. So that's just a couple of places where you can add some shimmer and glisten to the piece. So go around, work with your tipple, work with the gemstones that you have, and work up in here and have some fun with these. Take your time with the white pen. It's really, there's something very satisfying about it. I hope you enjoyed working with that white. It really does a lot for this piece. So I'm going to go through and look for places where I need to clean up my lines. Like you can see that there's some spots where the gold may have drowned out my black line, and so I'm just going through and looking for places where I need to clean up my lines. So now is a great time to do that type of work where you feel like, okay, this needed to be cleaned up. I lost some of my depth here and I'm going to put it back in. Take your time, don't rush through. Really look at your piece and see where you feel like you need to add a little bit more emphasis to your lines. So here we are. I've gone and placed my chop right down here, my initial, so that I know that I've completed the piece. And even though we've completed the tangling, we have just begun the journey with our word of the year, our Sankalpa. And I hope that you'll place your tile in a spot where you can see it every day, so that it is a gentle reminder for you to stay with manifesting this intention, this quality that you want to bring into your life. I keep mine by my nightstand, but you could put it in the bathroom on your bathroom mirror, or you could put it near your coffee mug, wherever you have your morning cup. That's always a great place to put it. You could put it even on the cabinet. So I hope that you will continue to work with this word throughout the year, and even if you fall down, just keep coming back and keep coming back. If you enjoyed the class today, please give us a thumbs up or a nice review, or even better, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page here. It'll notify you every time I do a new video and add it to the channel. And if you'd like to join us on Facebook, we have the Tangled Yogi Art Community page on Facebook. All you have to do is just answer the questions and you can join our community, which is filled with students and teachers that share their work and are very supportive, and we all learn from each other. So that's it for me. I'm Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi. I hope that your dreams and your Sankalpa are manifested this year in 2022. Have a great rest of the day.